Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to our first meeting of the year. I'm happy to have everyone back. I hope your holidays went well. The meeting notes are in the chat, so feel free to drop in your agenda items and let me know how your holiday went. I really spent mine visiting friends, so that's how mine went. Grinch, did you? Is it the cartoon?
I was, yeah, now I typed it, so I should put it back. I celebrated Grinchmas with friends, so that's when we don't go back to visit our families and we stay in our local city and watch terrible Christmas movies and cook.
Terrible Christmas movies. I can relate. I watch a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies. So, so yes, so that's good. I did combine family and friends together. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, hi you guys, Happy New Year. So we have some announcements. This was from Jonathan Starr, Energy, Climate, and Environment Workshop. It's virtual, January 16th. I think that's next week. So you could message Jonathan Starr for more details if you're interested in this. Also, we have some of our working group members that are presenting at First Backstage in Berlin. It's happening March 10th to 11th. I was supposed to be here, but they didn't accept my talk. So I won't be going. But yeah, they're Kathy, Angela, Michael, and Jonathan Starr and David as well will be presenting. So if you are attending First Backstage, and I think they have like a virtual option as well. I've attended virtually in the past few years, so you should definitely check this out and check out their talk as well. Also, David is also organizing, I think George Washington University is doing their first open source conference in March. So it's open for applications, CFPs is open. So you could apply to give a talk. Oh, let me open this. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I could apply to give a talk if you're interested in speaking, or even being a sponsor as well. What's the last thing? So also, this is also something that David dropped here. Open Climate Fund and Open Sustainable Technology has like a list of open source projects that address the SDG 13. So I think he put this as a recommendation if we could use this list to set up a prototype using our metrics for standards. David is currently away. He won't be here today because he's currently on a flight. I think he has a conference he's attending. So yeah, we could discuss this maybe in our next meeting as well. Also, we have set up the GitHub repository. So it's really open for text. It's open for people to add issues or things you might be thinking about. There are already some issues here. So this is kind of like our async collaboration. So if you want to add any topics or any issues, please feel free to put them up here as issues. Currently, what we have here is like the goals, which I think one of the goals of this first meeting is if we could look through this and also think about what's kind of narrowing our focus to what we want to achieve over the next 6 months and also looking at timeline. I don't know. I don't think I've seen any announcements for the UN Oslo for Good conference yet. So I think probably it's going to still happen in July. So yes, so this is the part where I stop talking and ask for people's thoughts or outputs, like with narrowing our focus based on these goals and these actions. Yeah, anybody can we go for it. I see a typo here. I think some of these actions are things that we might need to start doing. Um, Also looking at this list, if we say, for example, we want to use this list to do a prototype for metrics, we need to kind of figure out what's current metrics in CHAOSS are related to the SDGs and what new ones we want to create. Just to yeah, so anyone, if you have any thoughts or feedback. Yeah, Remy, could go for it.
So back in October, one of the initial conversations that we started to have was around issue number 1 on the repo. Our team talked about how we had used Cookie Cutter as a tool to gather metadata about various repositories and how that could be a useful way to gather metadata about which SDGs a project is related to. Since then, over the holiday break, our team has been experimenting with another approach where the Cookie Cutter tool is a command line tool and it requires people to install tools locally on their machine. Now we have a very early prototype. It's very, very early. We just shipped it, I think, yesterday, actually, where we are able to generate very basic web forms using a static site and then let people input their information into a form and then download that metadata right from the web, and is a little bit of a better user experience, especially for folks who are less comfortable with the command line. I will post an update to that ticket today before the end of this meeting. We'll drop a link to some of the stuff that's been happening there, but that is a new development and something that we've started experimenting with, and I thought it was worth sharing here. So I will update that ticket there and share the repository. Natalia has been working on that. I don't know if you want to say anything else about it, Nat.
Let's see. No, I think you covered all the bases, but yeah, I just finished up the form actually. So once it's shipped onto prod, I can probably add the link to the issue.
Thanks,
Okay,
Nat.
I do have a question, Remy. So with this, like with this tool, are you looking to leverage some of the metrics here to get feedback? Or how can this group kind of also help in with this work? Because I think one of the goals is just making things easier for maintainers, open source maintainers, and also people in the social good sector to do things more efficiently or to measure things. So like how can this group help with is it with feedback with also in terms of the metrics? So that's kind of the question I have.
Yeah. So the first step is to get metadata. So one of the things that is part of the public code.yaml standard that's being used in the Europe land and other places like Germany and Italy, there is a section in there to talk about and describe your software. And I believe part of the digital public goods standard is to say, like, specifically which SDGs are associated with your software. So we are working to harmonize these different standards with what we're doing in our inventory efforts so that we can list if a federal project relates to a sustainable development goal, we can include that in our metadata. And then once we know what all the repos are that are related to SDGs, whether that's international or federal, then we can start to gather some CHAOSS metrics out of those. So I'd almost call it like pre-work that gets us sort of ready to figure out where we should be running the metrics models and like what repositories to look at. But it is a good first step, and it's still early in our journey. But I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and just mention that over the holidays, I think it was December 23rd, there was a new act that was passed into law by Congress in the United States called the Share IT Act. I'm not a lawyer. You can read it yourself, but the TLDR is basically that agencies need to start gathering metadata about the custom software that is built, whether it's by federal employees or by their contractors, and then keep those in a repository, whether it's a public or a private repository. So we believe in the OSPO here that we can start to align the existing federal source code policy standard, the code.gov standard that uses code.json, as a way of gathering that metadata. So that's what we're experimenting with. That's what we've been building towards. And our version of code.json is trying to be compatible with public code.yaml, which is the more international standard that we see used in other nations. So we're hopeful that all of these different things can align nicely, and that all these standards will play nice, and we can build some reference implementations to show how that could be done. It's still early. The law just passed a couple weeks ago. There's still 180 days, I think, after it's enacted before the CIOs of the agencies come up with their strategy for how to do the implementation. But we've been working on this metadata work, inspired heavily by the OSPOs for Good work that we saw in 2024 and even 2023. So we'll keep updating the group as we go along. But those I thought were interesting updates for this team, since we've talked about it in previous meetings with the cookie cutter stuff.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. See, Michael just joined. Welcome, Michael. Yeah. So I think for this particular item, it's kind of what will guide how we'll go in the next couple months before the conference. So if anyone has any feedback to give, the repositories here as well, we could either open up an issue or drop it on the channel that we have. Yeah. Still the start of the year, so everybody's still putting up. Yeah. Okay. I think Michael, do you want to share the DPGA meeting? What
Yeah,
happened?
absolutely.
Like,
And I'll drop a link in the chat as well, with a little bit of a summary of this event. But we had what they call the annual members meeting for the Digital Public Goods Alliance, happened in November in Singapore, and apparently I heard initially some conflicting reports, but I'm told it was the largest annual gathering so far. So they're still growing in terms of numbers of people. I don't know that they've published the exact number, but there's a whole group photo there, so you can get an idea of who was able to show up. But it was quite productive, and I think that there are a few interesting things specifically for this group to take away. And for those who may be on that aren't totally familiar with the Digital Public Goods Alliance, this is a loose network of organizations that are focused on supporting this notion of digital public goods. And as a reminder, it's not a one-to-one match with open source. I like to draw it as like a classic Venn diagram with the three circles, where you have open source in one circle, digital public goods in another circle, and something called digital public infrastructure in another circle. So DPGs, or digital public goods, maybe open source software, but they also include things like open content and open AI models. And I won't open that can of worms today because that's still up in the air. But it goes beyond just software in terms of its scope of what a digital public good is. And many years ago, we wrote a standard, as Remy mentioned, which does actually tie back to the SDGs, and people who want to get certified, at least as a DPG, need to be showing some type of direct relevance when they go through that process of one or more of the SDGs. But so this is the group of organizations, and in some cases individuals, that really want to support that notion of something beyond just open source, but something that has a real social impact behind it, something that's ultimately delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals in some way. So there's a good alignment with this group and the DPG Alliance. And so I think that they will be, quite interested in the work collectively that we're doing and may be able to help support us in some way, to be determined. And I saw that they're out in the issue tracker of looking at whether or not we want to do some type of collaboration with them. But just as a heads up, I also said in the board meeting, so in my day job at UNDP, we're one of the board members for the DPG Alliance, and one of the things that came out of the board meeting that's represented here in that blog post that I linked to, there are kind of 4 action areas that the DPG Alliance are trying to get its member organizations to focus on for the coming year. And those 4 things that I think we may be able to help support a bit in our work as well here. One, getting organizations to focus on being what they call open source first. And you can see the bullets here. And obviously that's going to look different for every organization and how easily they can advocate for that. But really trying to get those organizations to advocate for starting any conversation with what can we do with the open source software that's already out there and building upon, or creating some other resource for the public as part of this project that we're taking on. So getting that as integrated into those project planning conversations from day one. Another activity is building more digital public goods that will improve access to open data in some way. So basically, kind of focusing in on that problem space. If anyone's dealing with any type of data analytics or data processing, to help promote building more open source solutions to fill in gaps in that space. The third one is quite interesting, and I think and also an opportunity for us, trying to promote more funding to build digital public goods for digital public infrastructure. And this is a very confusing term. This is the other circle in that Venn diagram that I mentioned. And digital public infrastructure may or may not include open source, and it may or may not include digital public goods. So this is digital infrastructure for the public is a better way to think about it. These are things that governments or even civil society might be building for the public interest or for public services that are tech based is the best way to think about that. And so while in many cases that might be the existing suite of the digital public goods that are out there, or it may be other open source tools like LibreOffice or Linux or things like that. It may not necessarily be that way. So what the DPG Alliance is trying to focus in on is getting more DPGs funded to serve that digital public infrastructure need that's out there, because we're hearing more and more from governments that they want to invest in technology projects, and we want to make sure that there are DPGs out there that are meeting those needs. And so part of the value that I think this group can provide is by doing more work on linking the software back to the various SDGs, will help the governments more quickly see what solutions out there could be well suited for their problems and their opportunities, and ultimately increase more funding back into the projects as part of the investment in those DPI activities, building out the infrastructure in the various countries. And then the final focus area for the DPG Alliance is really on climate. They don't normally take on a lot of thematic areas, but they want to really start promoting more investment in climate-focused applications and software solutions. So not only investing in what's already out there, and there are a handful of them that are already in the DPG registry on their website, but also getting more DPG qualified solutions out there. And this may be building things greenfield from scratch, or nudging things in that right direction and adapting them into the DPG standards. So making clear the relevance to the SDGs. And so this is another opportunity for this group if there is climate focused software or Earth observation, I think they called it at one point, software that's out there that we can start linking more tightly to the SDGs. This will again help their goal for this year. So those are kind of the 4 focus areas that there's kind of this loose agreement by the members that they want to take on. And then further down the page there, it will tell you some of the more specific conversations that happen there. So I'd encourage everyone to just scan some of this. There are a few interesting links as well to some of the projects that are out there. But overall, it was quite a productive meeting. I think one of the interesting things that will here in the next 6 months or so, and certainly by the time that we all convene again in New York at this OSPOS for Good event, which I'll say more about in just a moment. But by the time we get to that point, we should start seeing some of the DPGA members showing some progress toward these areas, actual tasks that they're taking on or projects that they're taking on. And so I think for us, it's wise to kind of keep our ears open, and I'll certainly do my part in feeding back some of the opportunities here to this group, because we might see some real clear opportunities for collaboration in terms of what data or insights some of these projects that the members have may need or could be beneficial to them. So that's the update from Singapore. Overall, a really great event, very promising. And I said I'd mention more about the New York event. I had hoped to have some really specific details on kind of the date and some of the logistics kind of previewed, but I've heard two things that I'll hopefully get more clarity on Friday. I've heard kind of that same week in July, but I also heard someone say it might be in late June as well. But nevertheless, around the same time of year, still in the same place. One thing that I did hear about that will be an improvement from last year is they're trying to get both an extra day there at the UN headquarters for some more, time and space to talk with each other, as well as have more breakout rooms. We were all kind of set in a single track in that big hall, which was great. But we're also trying to get some smaller rooms as well in the conference center to have more track-oriented programming as well. So there may be some more hands-on opportunities to do like specific workshops or sessions and kind of a smaller audience, somewhat like we did at the Microsoft event for those who attended that the day after. But we're kind of integrating that into the main programming schedule. So stay tuned. That's like really loose planning kind of knowledge right now. So it's not necessarily written in stone yet, but this is at least the intent. The challenge is like trying to actually secure the rooms and everything. And I'm going to talk with my colleague Omar, who's kind of the chief scheduler for that, the chief leader of getting all of those resources together. So I'll report back as soon as I have it, but just know that there might be a little bit flexibility on the date. So just keep that in mind if people are really wanting to attend that. But as soon as I have something identified, I'll share it with the group, so we'll be the first to know. So that's all from my side. If anybody has questions or clarity, either shoot me an email, or I'm happy to take questions here. But I think the DPGA will be a good partner for this group in the long run, and we'll figure out how best to work together. But I did mention this group to several of the folks there, and they were really thrilled to hear that we're out here thinking about this stuff. So I think we've got good partners in the making. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And one Bolaji, we had David and I talked to Bolaji some weeks back as well. I think he mentioned that he would pop in some of our meetings. So yes. And on the climate part, earlier in the meeting I shared David dropped this here. If we want to do like a prototype, I think he would talk about this later. So I think that's kind of related to what we're thinking about as well. I don't think I have any questions. Are there any questions for Michael? Okay, I think the other thing, Michael, we're talking about, if we would want to like recommendations to narrow our focus based on these goals that we have already. So we kind of like an action item will be to go through these and see how we want to narrow our focus over the next 6 months before the UN Gospel for Good, and have something concrete or a tool or a framework or standard that we could share. So that could be an action item for the next meeting. Since this, I just sprung it all up on everybody. So, yeah, so we could think about this. Any comments or any more agenda items?
I have a question, just confirming our schedule for this year, if we're still on the same kind of meeting pattern cadence as last year.
Yeah, we've been doing bi-weekly, so I depends, if we have the need, since we have a goal now in July, we can talk about if bi-weekly cadence works, to catch up, or we want to, do a weekly one. I think we started with doing once every 2 weeks, since it was a new group. So I think if we start working on stuff, we can talk about adjusting this, having submitting. So that's open for change. Well, already specific to the meeting time.
For me, I've blocked the time on my calendar for the full year actually. So at least this is fine for me. Obviously flexible if other people need to change or want to increase. I think it's probably going to depend on what we want to deliver by that July event, right? If we're going to try to show us any type of prototypes or trying to kind of put a presentation together. We'll want to make sure we allocate enough time, as a group to bring all of those materials together. But based on what I'm hearing about that event, I would encourage us to think about coming up with some type of not necessarily a collaborative workshop, but kind of an interactive brainstorm with interested parties, right? If we've got some type of concept in terms of just looking at some of the issues here of having some of these tools in terms of the descriptive resource files, I guess we could call them, right? This metadata. If we can have some type of proof of concept and start kind of floating that by and trying to get feedback from various interested parties to try to refine that, it could be a really nice outcome of having all the right people together in a single place. You get always some magic there, right? If you have all the smart people in the room together. So it could be really a nice opportunity to kind of debate and improve whatever it is we want to come up with in terms of the data, making sure we've got a lot of good feedback from stakeholders. So that's my hunch. Anyone's welcome to kind of prove me wrong or take it in a different direction, but I think it would be really nice to see us make the most of that opportunity of presuming the attendee profile is somewhat like last year. I think we'll have a lot of great insight there gathered there in New York.
Yeah, I do agree, especially with if there will be the extra day for the extra sessions. I think it would be good, right? To have, because I did for the Linux, the one we had at Microsoft Office. I think it was we had some like engaging sessions where people really wanted to contribute, and there was like small time to do that. So. I think you could keep us updated with like the plans and like if this will be open to CFPs or how the methods, how they do it.
Yeah, as soon as I get those details, I'll let you know. There was at least some talk. All of us kind of who have been doing the planning were chatting at that meeting in Singapore about this, in fact, and talked about maybe trying to establish some track leaders, right, and kind of divide it into some thematic rooms or something like that. And so maybe do it a bit more distributed model, more like FOSDEM or something, right, where you'll have different individuals kind of sorting through the goals for each of the rooms. So depending on how much space we can get, I think will be the driving factor of how participatory the CFP process might be. I'm like vying for like 4 or 5, at least 4 or 5 kind of parallel sessions, because I'm a big fan of smaller groups. And while there's great power in having everybody in a big room like we did last year, I think getting those small conversations is where the magic really happens.
Yeah, great. Okay. I think we'll keep our eyes glued for that. I think that's all the items we have on the agenda. anyone have any extra things they want to talk about or share? No. So I would like to propose like an action item for the next meeting, to really think about this, and, you know, drop some thought, maybe through the issues, here or maybe on the channel as well. So we can, I think we need to kind of define what we want to do, and then start working towards that. So yeah, that's the action item for everyone that attended today. And thank you for attending as well. See you all next week.
All right. Thank you, Ruth, for coordinating. Much appreciated. Good to see you all.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you.
Bye. Take care.
All right.